Welcome to Eagle Spire Gaming. I'm your host, Crown, and today is November 11th, Veterans Day here in the US, and we are talking about the bonded Cybernetica support formations, what they are, and how we're going to use them. And if you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, and if you like the content, subscribe so that I know to keep making more of it. We got a lot of models to build though, so let's get started. First and foremost, formations. How do they work in the game? Well, you start the game, you start your army list building by picking a core faction that you're going to use. There are, as of currently, 6 factions that you can choose from. Our starting 2 were the Legions Astartes and the Solar Auxiliary. Then, all at once, all in one book, we got the Dark Mechanicum and the Mechanicum Tagmata. In addition to that, Knight Households and the Collegia Titanicus became their own factions where you could play them as their own army, all without being allies or having to play as a only death, Titan death game. So there are now 6 of them. And how you build your list is you must have one formation per 1,500 points that you're playing. If you're playing a 3,000 point game, you need to have 2 formations. You probably want to have more. If you're playing Titans, you might not be able to. You might not even be able to if you're playing... No, you should be able to if you're playing Knights. In addition to that, you are then allowed to have a bunch of allied formations. You can have 1 allied formation per core formation that you have. That is to say, the formations that follow your core faction. You also have special formations, the legendary formations. They still can only be 30% of your allied formations. In addition to only being able to take 1 per core formation, you also can only have 30% of your list be taken from the allies. The formations of legend can be your core faction, can be your core list, or your allied. So they would either fit into that minimum 1 requirement per 1,500 points, or they may just be you can only have 1 per core formation. It depends on which ones you're taking and what your faction is. But you can also only have 1 of a formation of legend. Now we have a 4th type of, if you consider formations of legend as its own category of formation, we have a 4th type of formation, the support formation. These do not count as allies, though detachments in it are not all going to be from your primary faction. They do not count towards your support formations for the purpose of 1-to-1. They're their own 1-to-1. So you can have 1 support formation per core, just like the allied formations. If you have 1 formation of Legions Astartes, you can have 1 support formation, and you can have 1 allied formation. You can have 3 formations doing that. And you can only do that if you are taking 1,500 points or less. Because once you go up and you have that 3,000 points, now you need a 2nd formation. So I think we've got a pretty good understanding of how formations work here. What are these formations? What are these support formations? Well, we're going to go into each of them, but they are allowing us to bring a special formation of Mechanicum Tagmata into any of our other formations. You can even bring them into a core formation, a core force of Mechanicum Tagmata. But why would you do that then? Is because it's different. It's not just a normal formation available to you. It's a completely new formation. And you can do that for all of the 6 factions. There's 7 of these. There's 2 for Knights. We'll cover them all. They bring what do they bring to the table? Each of them has their own little thing that they bring. They allow you to break the allied requirements. So if you wanted to have a core force of Space Marines and you wanted a bunch of Mechanicum units running around, you can only have 30% of your army do that. But if you bring the special formation for that, the Brethren of Iron, you can now have a lot more of your force be that second faction. They don't count towards that faction. They count towards your primary faction. They don't get all of your primary faction's rules. They get their own rules. It lets you play around with the list a lot more creativity, a lot more changes and stuff, right? They also have something special about them than normal formations. Some of them, not all of them. Some of them, there's at least one that's just nothing special. It's just you can have these things next to those things, and that's really all it is. They also kind of look cool. Check out the rules for them. I'm gonna have them posted, but they bring to they've got recommendations on how to paint them. The one for the Dark Mechanicum, the lore behind it is that some of the tech priests, the Archmagos, they purposely infected their automata with this virus, and to represent that, just paint them, have glowing red eyes and glowing red joints and everything. And that sounds really cool. A lot of opportunities there. It's up to you how you want to do that, though. You don't have to paint them in a certain way. Nobody's going to require you to do that. It would look really cool, though, and I bet there's going to be a lot of really cool things that people put together. People are going to do cool things regardless, but a lot of cool ideas are probably going to be inspired by some of what they said. But let's talk about the first one, the Itinerant Cybernetica cohort. This is your one for the Mechanicum Tagmata. And the lore for these guys is that it's basically, it's a bunch of automata that somehow got severed from the main connection. They're no longer getting, they stopped getting uploads on, what to do from their tech priest, and now they kind of just fight whoever they perceive as a threat. They join up with allies. They're kind of almost Legion of the Damned, except for, if you know what that is, where they fight for, they show up unannounced. They weren't really told to go there. They kind of just, that's not really their main thing. Their main thing is that they aren't following a tech priest. Nobody's telling them what to do. They're doing what they find they need to do. And so your compulsory slots are going to be either, just like any other formation, you've got the compulsory and you've got the optional, and then sometimes you've even got some choice between this or that. You can have this or that. And in this one, the compulsory is kind of a choice because you either get 3 detachments of support or 3 vanguard, and that's your compulsory. And I think that's the first time that's not been used. They don't have that as an option anywhere else. That's the first time we're seeing that. So that's interesting. Your optional slots are then going to be either 2 support or 2 vanguard, up to 2 support, up to 2 vanguard. You can have all 4 of those if you wanted to. So our there's requirements here. All of your everything in this one has to have Cybernetica Cortex, and that is a special rule that the automata units have. So you're not going to be able to take the Ursex cohorts or any of the cohorts. You're taking the automata. So and Cybernetica Cortex means that they can only do, they've got 2 options for their orders that they can do, usually advance and first fire, or advance and charge, or advance and march. Usually advance is one of those options, I think, from what I've seen. And they can't be, so everybody in here has to have Cybernetica cohort, and none of them, the only time you can issue orders outside of those, what's in that requirement, is going to be if you have a controller, Cybernetica Cortex controller, which is going to be your tech priest and your magos and maybe some other things. These guys can't get those. So nobody from an other formation can, your other formations are going to have Cortex controllers. You can't issue these guys orders. These guys aren't listening to those orders. They can only do the orders that are in their Cortex. The cool thing that you can do with them is when you activate one of them, at the activation step, when you say, all right, these guys are gonna do their thing now, they can then take the order, they can swap their order from a nearby, and I didn't write it down, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's 6 or 8 or something. But you can take the formation, you can take one of the cortex orders, so Cybernetica Cortex, advance or charge, from that nearby formation. It has detachment in the same formation, right? So you got one unit and they were on advance, but you now need them to first fire. You can swap, you activate them, you put them to first fire. You're not going to be able to do it after they have have already moved. You do it when they activate to move. Instead, they just stay put, and now they're going to be on first fire. And that doesn't have to be an order that they couldn't already do. So if you've got 3 of the same units, they were all going to advance, but now they're all on first fire. You can, a little bit of trickery. So what this does for you, this formation is going to give you an incredible amount of unpredictableness to them, where your enemy isn't going to be able to determine what they can do. It does have some downsides. You do have to they're going to be limited to what they can do, and they've got to, otherwise they're going to be limited to those 2 options, and they otherwise have to be able to, they have to be within, they have to be nearby to switch their orders around otherwise. So there is that, but you can totally play around with that. It gives you a range of, options when you plan for it properly. The next one we got, and I'm just going to go down the list from when you look at the downloads, this is the order they go in. I'm not picking anything out in favor, we're going to go with the Brethren of Iron, and these are for Legions Astartes. And for most of these, what these are is the Mechanicum has built up ties with, for whatever reason or another, except for that last one. That last one was those robots all kind of just like, we don't know what's going on. We got severed from our connection, now we do what we want. But the rest of these are pretty much, for whatever reason, like, hey, I'm gonna help you, we're good friends, I'm gonna give you some of my robots, and maybe you give me something in return, or maybe, this is just a thank you for all those times that you've helped, that kind of stuff, right? So the Brethren of Iron, these are for Space Marines. Your compulsory options are 1 HQ and 2 core. That's what you're required to do. And then your optional is you can have another core, a bastion, and 2 support. And then you can also have 1 more support or 2 vanguard. Now, your HQ has to be taken from Legions Astartes. It has to be a Space Marine HQ. That doesn't mean that it has to be the infantry one. It can be one of those tank commanders. So you've got that going for you as an option. Your core, all your core choices must be Legion Astartes or a Thalix cohort. Mechanicum is unique so far in the fact that its core option is 2 core options. Everybody else only has the 1 core option, then with several different what would otherwise be support upgrades that they could give to them. And the Mechanicum has the Thalix cohort and the Tech Thrall cohort. None of these use Tech Thralls. They're lobotomized, essentially, people. They're basically, hey, we need a body that we can hook some wires up to, and now it's gonna shoot this gun when we tell it to. Not the kind of thing you give to your allies who are all fleshy humans to say, like, hey, thanks for helping us out. Here, we found this guy half dead, and we stuck a gun to him, and now that was your brother. We shouldn't have done that, right? You don't want to do that. So your core has to be from Legion Astartes or the Thalix cohort. And the support, vanguard, and bastion units must all be Tagmata and have Cybernetica Cortex. That's going to be a trend. It's usually, I don't think it's ever not the case where most of this stuff has to have Cybernetica Cortex. So they all are going to require, aside from those Thalix cohorts, they're all going to require a controller, Cortex controller to tell them to do something other than the 2 options that are on their list. All Marines in this formation are going to have Cortex controller. So your HQ and your up to 3 core units are going to have, because they can all be Space Marines or they can be the Thalix cohort. They're going to have Cortex controller. The Mechanicum, they're not going to get the Legion trait, but instead they will gain line when within 8 inches of one of those, of a Space Marine, any Space Marines from this formation, which means whenever they're within 8 inches of one of the Space Marines that have Cortex controller, which is also an 8-inch range. So that's maybe you always want to be that way. There's times where it's absolutely gonna make sense to get out of that Cortex controller range, but they'll have line while they're in it. So uses for this. This gives you 3, maybe even 4 Space Marine units that will have Cortex controller now. If you are allying if you're going heavy into your Mechanicum and you're doing this to get more, you can do this to get more Mechanicum into your Space Marine list, but you also can do this just have Space Marines that can control it. Now you got more Cortex controllers running around. If you plan things out right, you only need so many of them. You'll only need but so many Cortex controllers, but now you've got Space Marines that are doing it. And maybe it's 3 tactical legionnaires with a tank running around, or you take the commander to be in there, to be in one of those units, or you can put the commander in with some Thalix cohorts, and you've got a lot of options with that. And line's a nice buff on what are already fairly good, usually, maybe not the Thalix cohorts, but the rest of the Mechanicum options here. Your all of your automata are pretty good, they have a pretty decent CAF. 4s, 5s, maybe even 6s, I think. Their guns are usually pretty good at shooting up infantry too, but a lot of them are pretty, they're good at both shooting and melee, and that usually costs, that means that they come at a higher points cost, but sometimes you want that ability to, they had a saying back in older 40k editions, it's probably still true for Space Marines, where they were good at shooting and they were good at melee, but they weren't great at either. And what you do, you shoot the stabby ones and you stab the shooty ones. And that's kind of the Mechanicum's role here in a lot of these. The Thalix guys, they're not so great at the stabbing part. They only got a CAF 1. CAF 2 if you give them line. But they have jump packs, they have good range, and 5-up save, so that's definitely better than Solar Auxiliary. And their guns are definitely better than Solar Auxiliaries, and maybe even Space Marines too, really. And jump packs, so you got that. So next we got the Collegia Titanicus Support cohorts, and these are, of course, for the Titans. Your compulsory slot is going to be 1 Titan. Which kind? Doesn't matter. It's a Titan. And if you took that as your Warhound, then it would, of course, you would be able to upgrade it to 3 Titans, as it is a Warhound pack. But it's a Titan slot. And 2 support. Those are, of course, going to come from from the Mechanicum side of things. And your optional is going to be 2 core, 2 Titans, and either 2 support or 2 bastion. And that's a trend for these again, it's not 1 or 1 or 1, it's 2 of this or 2 of that, or 1 of this and 2 of that. It's usually, there's a high number, usually one of them is 2 as an option. So your non-core, on all of this, your non-core are going to have Cybernetica Cortex. Oh, goodness. Cortex is a real word. Why can't I say it? Your Titans are going to get cortex controller, and they will count their tactical strength as equal to the remaining wounds while within 3 inches of non-titans from this formation. And this one has core, and unless I missed it, you can actually have the tech thralls in here. And I get the feeling that they were really going for the theme of where titans have a bunch of in 40k times. I know it's Qatari, but they've got, masses of robots, of little robot cyborgy, extra appendage guys running around underneath them, supporting them in like as like a tide. Read Titanicus. That's a good book. That's where I'm getting this image from. But they want you to have these things within 3 inches of them so that they can get a bonus. The real strength to this, there's two things here, right? One is you get that now your Titan has some tactical strength, right? And Warhound's gonna have what is a Warhound? 3 wounds. Yeah, so it's got a tactical strength of 3. It's not great, right? If you plan it out right, yes, you can make that work. You can make that work in addition to the supporting units. You shoot off the enemy units that are on it. You can make giving your Titans tactical strength, you can make that work. It's going to be difficult. You're playing at a handicap already. You're playing to kill things with Titans. You'll have fun. You should have fun. Aim to have fun. Don't aim to win. Have fun with this game. That's what most of these are for. That's every single one of them has a suggestion on how to paint them. Have fun, but you can make that work. It's going to be difficult. The real reason you take it is because this gives you access of 1 to 3 Titans of your choice. 1 to 3 Titans, no restrictions. Most of the Titan formations, if you were playing a Titan army, right? Not Titan support, you're playing a Titan army. A lot of those formations are take several things, and maybe you don't want those extra Titans. War Master, you can take a War. There's a formation, have a War Master. Warlord, take a Warlord and a Reaver and a Warhound. Now you've got your Warlord, and then you can take some extra Warlords as your. You can take extra Warlords as your optional stuff. But if you just want a Warlord, if you want no Reavers, well, that's 3 Warlords that you can take, no Reavers. And then you'll have to take something else somewhere else because you can't get that formation without another formation. But if you want all Reavers, they've got a formation that's 2 Reavers. But maybe you don't want 2 Reavers. Maybe you just want 1 more Reaver. That gives you it. You just have to take 60 points or 50 points of Thallax cohorts because those are 25 points apiece. You have to take a few tech guys, but that's not that big of a deal, and it gives you some cheap bodies to hang in the back and take care of other stuff. Which you could do with your allied points, but maybe you want to use all your allied points, or maybe you don't want to take a full formation of something for allied points. So, I mean, two core slots is probably not enough to support your. It's a scale. Maybe that's the minimum that you can support it with. You probably want more, but do what you want. This also gives you Titans now. Let's say you do take. Say you also have several hundred points of allied in mech. This now gives you Titans that those Titans can control the rest of your Tagmatas. The rest of you guys are in Tagmata. So there is that going for it. You could also ally them with Dark Mechanicum, and I don't know if they need Cortex, Cybernetica Cortex. I don't think they have that. I need to look into it. I spent the other day in the ER. You guys don't want to hear about that, but I'm a little bit behind. I haven't been paying attention to everything going on. Knight Household Retainer cohorts. These are for knights. There's 2 for knights. This is the good one for knights. Compulsory, 1 knight, 2 vanguard. Optional, 2 more knights, and these are banners, so you can have up to 1 to 3 knights in that banner. 2 knights, 2 armigers, 3 vanguard. All vanguard must have, so you get between 2 and 5 vanguard. All Vanguard must have Cybernetica Cortex. Your Armigers and your Morax Talons can't be taken as upgrades to your Knights. And then those are your limitations. Questoris and Cerastus banners are going to gain Cortex Controller. Your Acostus Knights, they're not going to get anything. They're not going to get Cortex Controller, but you can still take them. I didn't see anything saying that you couldn't, so you can. All Knights gain forward deployment or outflank, depending on if you took all Vorax or all Voltrax. I paraphrased here. The rules actually say if you take all Vorax, or if all your Vanguard detachments are taken by Vorax, then you get forward deployment. All your Knights get forward deployment, and all of your Voltrax, you get outflank. So what this does for you, same thing as before, right? Now you can take a formation of Knights of one type or of three types. All the Knight formations that we currently have, if they ever make more, all of them are currently take 2 Questoris and a Cerastus, and then you can take more of each as your upgrade. Take 2 Acostus and a Questoris. Well, what if you only want 2 Acostus? What if you want a Cerastus and Acostus? What if you all those different options? This is, have you ever played Magic the Gathering? It's called mana fixing. It lets you pick out what you want and make some changes without getting too nitty gritty. And when those things cost 180, 200 points a piece, you need this to fix that, so that you can, if you really want to tailor your Knights down, you can fix that. All at the cost of, I think the cheapest you can go is 35 points for these Vanguard. So, you save yourself, 70 points so that you can pick the Knights you want. That's a deal. In addition to that, you get the outflanking or the forward deploy. I like the forward deploy a lot more in this because for your melee Knights, they already got a pretty good range, but when you give them an extra movement before the start of the game, that is a lot of movement to have. Outflank is nice too, but if you are holding on to, if you've got 600 points in reserve, waiting to outflank the enemy, that's not something, that's a little dangerous for my taste, but it's an option, and it's an option that you have, and you can use it as you want. Maybe you only outflank one Knight with it. Maybe you got a small banner in there. It's up to you. We come now to our second Knight cohort, the Knight Household Aegeus cohort. And this one has a compulsory of 1 Knight and 2 support. 2 support this time, as opposed to Vanguard. And then our optional is 1 more Knight and 2 support and 2 bastions. So this one offers us a little bit more going on with it. All of your support and bastions must have Cybernetica Cortex. Again, it seems to be the rule for everything is it's got to have Cybernetica Cortex. They're not letting you have any of the like Ursex or Tech Priest or anything like that until the end. Wait till you see what they got. All your Knights will have Cortex Controller from this, and you can't take any Armiger or Mortex Talons at all. Not as upgrades, not as detachments on their own. You just don't get them. And that's it. So what's the use? Well, you lose out on the flank and the forward deployment so that you can have support and bastion units in your Knight household. You could get them by taking allies. Maybe you already spent all your ally points. Maybe you don't want to spend ally points. Maybe that would be with all the extras that you need, that would cost more, and you really just want that bastion or those support units. That would be why you would take this. There is a, if you wanted a lot of Mechanicum and in an otherwise Knight list, but the cost of Knights being as high as they are, it might make more sense to just build up a Mechanicum list with Knights as allies. But this way it lets you have Knights that have the Cortex Controller. This one's use is going to be a lot more. You got to be planning out what you're doing a lot more with this one. It's going to be a lot more niche. You're not going to see it as much, I don't think. But maybe. Could be an option. Ironbound rune hosts. This is for the Dark Mechanicum. I was reading what I could the other day while I was laid up in bed, and there was a lot of issues with this. But I was writing everything down today. I noticed that those issues were fixed. And originally, what was going on is they said that everything must have, the entire detachment has to have Cybernetica Cortex, but your HQ is coming from the Tagmata, Mechanicum Tagmata. They don't have a Cybernetica Cortex HQ. So there was this question, how are you supposed to play it? When I was looking at it, it had already been fixed. So I pointed that out. Which is cool. Apparently I was the first person to notice it. But that's only because I was making this, right? Now it's fixed to say or Cortex controller. So yeah, what we got? Compulsory, 1 HQ, 2 support. Optional, 2 more support, a Vanguard, a Bastion, and either 2 support or Vanguard. So you're then going to replace all Cybernetica Cortex X, right, with March and Charge. So if they had Advance and Charge, or Advance and March, or Advance and First Fire, or whatever, it's now March and Charge. You can still issue them orders to say, like, I want you to advance, because they've got guns. All of these things have guns. They're decent guns. They're good in the charge. They're good at shooting. They're not great at either for what you pay for them, really. But and they pretty much all have decent defense stats too. But you're gonna replace those with March and Charge, and you're gonna give them Dread Aura 3. And what that means is they have -1 to their morale checks when they're within 3. But that's for your allies and your enemies too. So this gets you some Tagmata forces in your Dark Mech, which you otherwise wouldn't have been able. Dark Mechanicum can't have any of those things in it. Now you can, without having to worry about allying in. You can pretty much get everything. I don't think there's anything missing from your list. So if you got that battle group that they came out with for Mechanicum, you can play the entire thing as Dark Mechanicum now. You're just taking a support formation of Ironbound Rune Host. So that's cool. And then, they gave everything. They gave all of these guys that are forced to march and charge, get to the enemy. They gave all of those dread. That's a nice combo to have. It could have been worse. They could have said, "Hey, you've only got first fire, and we're going to give you dread." And that doesn't work, right? So it works out well. You're gonna have to plan. You're gonna have to plan out your attacks and your movement and everything. But that's it's fitting. It's definitely a fluffy. That's the one where they were talking about. They were talking about like paint all the gaps in the armor and the eye slits and everything. Paint that red. Give it a red glow. Black armor, red glow. Yeah, that'll look cool. That'll look scary. Give it a little bit of a nightmare theme to it, right? And our last one is the Iron Cohort. This is for Solar Auxiliary. We didn't save my favorite for last, but I do like it. I do like it, and I would definitely paint these guys up that way if it wasn't for the fact that I already just want to paint a Loyalist Mechanicum, so and I already have the color scheme for it, so they're not going to be colored to match my guys, but that would be cool, man. Pity. All right, so what we have is your compulsory is 1 HQ, and that's going to be, all your HQs are going to be taken from the Solar Auxiliary for this one, and I say all for a reason. You got 1 Tech Priest Auxilia, which if you recall, when in the Tech Priest thing, when you take a unit of them, you can actually then take up to 2 more, and they only count as that 1 slot, kind of like how old Zoanthropes and Carnifexes used to work in 3rd edition Tyranids. Goodness, that was my first Tyranid book, and I think maybe my second to last. One tech priest and 2 core. Your optional is going to be 1 more HQ, 1 more core, 1 support, 1 bastion, and either 2 support or 2 vanguard. All of your HQs are chosen from Solar Auxiliary and have Cortex Controller. Unlike Space Marines, your tertios will not have Cortex Controller. Your core can either be Solar Auxiliary, those tertios, or Thalix Cohort. Optional support, Vanguard, and Bastions all have to have Cybernetica Cortex. Correct me if I'm wrong, I never once said anything other than optional support, Vanguard, and Bastion must have Cybernetica Cortex. The only time it was different is when it said, or, yeah, with the rune host, or Cortex Controller. That's the only time that that's even an option. You do get, let me clarify something here. So you've got 1 support option that is compulsory, and it has to be a tech priest. It's compulsory. You don't get an option on that one. That's a tech priest. Your other support slot can't be a tech priest because it has to have Cybernetica Cortex. They do not say or Cortex Controller. I should have planned this out better. You got the Cortex, which is the Cybernetica Cortex. Man, you get 1 is the Cortex, and that's who you're controlling, and then the controller is the controller guy, right? I should have said it that way. We didn't. Oh well, I'm already throwing you off too much with that. All right. So this one, nice, because tech priests. Now you've got tech priests in your army without taking any allies, right? Let's say you already got your 900 points of allies of Titans, or you got 900 points of allies of Space Marines, or you just want a lot more. Whatever. It gives you some tech priests for all those tanks. In fact, you can take this as 1 HQ, 1 tech priest, and 2 tertios, and that's not far off from a normal minimum sized. That's a fairly decent minimum sized formation right there. It's actually and you've got tech priest for all your tanks, right? Another nice thing about it is your Thalix cohorts are better. They're more costly, but they are sturdier than your HQ. And you can put both of your good HQ in here, right? Because we've got 2 in the Solar Auxiliary. You got the Master and Tactician, and you got the one that's not. And you need all of them to be issuing out those orders. But you can put them into Thalix cohorts, which have +1 to their save. Not that great. They got a better gun, and they got a better move. None of those are really going to help them though, in their bodyguard duties. But yeah, you can do some nice things with that. And then of course, and I should have made this caveat at the beginning. Of course, you've got the bonus for all of these. You have the benefit of you get access to those units, right? Like, now you have a couple of these. You have a couple of the Mechanicum units, which are all, for the most part, more expensive because they are good at shooting and stabbing things. They're not great at either. They're usually not great at either. They are more durable. They've got their pros and their cons, but it's there. So those are the 7. Those are the 7 support formations that we have so far. One last interesting little thing about it that I wanted to, that I haven't seen a lot. I haven't been able to keep up with everything lately, because of that little issue, that I don't want to go too far into, but, Space Marines, the Legions, some of them mention formations of, well, it has to be a formation of all of this Legion. But when else can you can't take formations that have both, right? Well, now you can. It's not a formation of 2 legions. It's a formation of a legion and something that's not the Legion, right? So that's where those come into play. And you're probably looking at me like, what am I talking about right now? Because I didn't set up for that at all. But this video has gone on long enough. I don't think we should spend too much more time thinking about that. So I hope you like this video. I did what I could. Yeah. Thanks. Hey, thanks for listening to me rant for about 40 minutes. This has been Eagle Spire Gaming. I've been Crown. Thanks for flying by.